Have you ever felt your chest tighten, as if a silent winter had taken up residence within you, even when the sun shines outside? There are moments when the silence of others echoes louder than 1,000 screams, and you find yourself reduced to a whisper in a room full of voices. Perhaps you learned early on that your presence could be diminished, that your word did not carry enough weight to change the course of anything. And yet, here we are, wanting to be heard without knowing how to break through the invisible wall that imprisons our inner strength. If this kind of reflection truly moves you, perhaps this is your place. Consider subscribing to the channel. Carl Jung said that what does not become conscious acts as destiny. In you, a woman who has been silenced, there is an ancestral pain repeating itself with every gesture of seeking approval. This wound does not stem from any fault of yours, but from a legacy perpetuated in the collective brain. The feminine has often been taught to yield, to step back, to accept that her voice be discarded as if it were not an essential part of the very fabric of life. Acknowledging this pain is the first act of courage, for it is there that you find the seed of change. True fascination is not learned through formulas or seduction manuals. It springs from what is upheld in silence, with wholeness. It is in the recesses of your soul, where you have kept the fragments of what they call the duty to remain silent, that an invisible and irresistible power resides. This potency does not display itself to be admired. It exists before any light, before any conscious reflection. The woman who fascinates does not explain herself. She shows herself whole in her complexity, without asking permission to take up space. Jordan Peterson emphasizes that the woman who embodies internal order in the face of external chaos becomes a psychic gravitational center. When your soul finds coherence, when your body resonates a truth aligned with what you feel in your chest, the man around you perceives this strength and is willing to listen. It is not about imposition, but about symbolic authority. She is the axis, and the world turns around that presence which demands no validation from those who observe it. This video will not bring tricks or easy shortcuts. What you will discover here is a method of internal reconnection, an invitation to walk the winding paths of your unconscious and rescue the rightful owner of your worth. There are no magic formulas, only the daily practice of remembering who you really are, before all the voices that convinced you that you needed permission to exist. Prepare to dive into 5 steps that will illuminate every corner of that secret garden, where both the wound and the healing potential dwell. Here you will learn to identify where you still devalue yourself, to sustain the mystery that fascinates, to withdraw with dignity to gain respect, to change your energetic field with simple symbolic exercises, and to dance in the center of your own ancestral fire. Let us begin this journey together, walking with firmness and tenderness, eyes open to what pulses within you. There are moments when you remember a specific instant when you spoke and were not heard. Your word died in the air like a bird that cannot take flight. You felt your body tremble with the certainty that what you brought was invisible, as if your voice did not have enough density to shake the world around you. This experience is not an isolated coincidence, but the echo of a childhood where your presence was underestimated. At the core of this wound lies a girl who grew up learning that her opinion depended on external approval. Perhaps your mother herself silenced your emotions with a look of weariness, or a teacher interrupted your speech with an impatient gesture. This pattern crystallized in the unconscious as an irrefutable truth. To be loved, you need to show that you deserve a place. And since then you began to offer your best smile, your best shoulder, your best listening, all in an attempt to prove your worth. You started to measure yourself by how much you gave, by how much you stepped away from your own center to fit into someone else's space. Sometimes the love you sought became silent servitude. You became a refuge even for those who never stayed. The giving, which should have been a spontaneous gesture, turned into a bargaining chip. And, ironically, the more you gave, the less respect you felt, as if the constant offering could erode your intrinsic value. You waited, and no one returned. You loved with everything, and you were left in almost. If this resonated with you in some way, leave a like. It shows that these conversations are necessary. Identifying where you devalue yourself is the first step of the method. Ask yourself, in which moments do you yield before being invited to yield? When do you deny your time and energy to welcome someone who never even asked to enter? Look at these situations as clues left by your own body. Each tension in the shoulders, each clenched fist, each held sigh reveals a wound that still throbs, a part of you that pleads for recognition. This awakening does not require you to see yourself as responsible for others' inattention, but rather to perceive where you have repeated, in your own behavior, the narrative that your value needs to be earned. The woman who asserts herself in search of respect still acts from the logic of that girl who believed she needed to deserve a place in her family, in friendship, in love. By shedding light on these small acts of self-sabotage, the forced smile, the self-imposed silence, the relinquishing of yourself, you discover the shackles that prevent you from occupying the full spectrum of your strength, and by recognizing them, a sacred internal space emerges, free for the woman you truly are to begin manifesting without asking permission. In the next chapter, we will explore the archetype of the woman who fascinates, not the one who reveals too much, but the one who sustains the unspoken. From this point on, you will already be able to find the first foundation of your new presence, a foundation forged in honesty with your own soul. Somewhere within you there exists an ancient melody, a rhythm that pulses long before words arise. It is in this subtle frequency that the archetype of the powerful anima manifests. Jung described this figure as the bearer of mystery, a presence that cannot be explained but must be lived. When you abandon the desire to unveil every thought, allowing parts of your soul to remain veiled, you create an unattainable internal space, a bridge between the conscious and what pulses in the collective unconscious. It is there that true fascination flourishes, not by being objectified, but by being whole in its complexity. You may have learned that to be admired, you had to show every bit of yourself, every achievement, every emotion, every small victory recounted as if it were a trophy. However, the woman who truly fascinates knows that her potency does not lie in exhibition, but in the quietness of her internal fields. There is an irresistible magnetism in one who carries an ancestral secret in her gaze, in one who maintains reverence for the silence within her chest. It is as if, by not revealing everything, you leave a trail of curiosity and respect, inviting the other to approach with reverence, not imposition. In a conversation, notice the difference between someone who tries to fill every silence and someone who welcomes it. The voice that insists on the void tires, the one that pauses, invites. Each breath of yours can be a gesture of power, each hesitation a reminder that you do not need to be transparent to be essential. When you do not share every thought, you validate the value of your presence without needing applause. The woman who fascinates does not allow herself to be deciphered in her entirety immediately. She offers herself as a living enigma, and this creates a psychic field in which the other is drawn to discover, with each gesture, new nuances of who you are. A healthy man, one capable of listening to your subconscious, does not cling to obvious explanations. He seeks the symbolic strength you emanate. From the moment you decide not to justify yourself, but to ensure that your actions spring from inner coherence, you begin to act as a symbolic center. This archetypal figure does not oscillate between extremes. She is both bridge and pillar, mystery and depth. And when the other perceives this combination, something in his psyche is reunited. He feels that he must listen, for there is something greater than mere need for understanding. Feel in your body the contrast between external agitation and internal serenity. Let your gaze carry the memory of the times you were interrupted or belittled. At the same time, allow each time you remain silent without giving in to the urgency to explain yourself, to be an act of self-assertion. The silence you sustain is not empty, but full of meaning. It is a sacred space where your essence pulses without fear of being lost, for it already dwells within you, complete and indestructible. When you speak from that place, your words reverberate like echoes of something greater, not because you repeat ready-made phrases, but because your voice is tuned to your core. Each term carries weight, not by length, but by the emotional density that precedes it. It is at that point that fascination happens, not in the quantity of information you deliver, but in the quality of presence you offer. By keeping part of yourself in reserve, you ensure that each gesture, each look, and each word are treated as gifts, not as rights. Notice how this transforms the dynamics of your relationships. When the other senses that he cannot exhaust your enigma, he becomes a gentle explorer, willing to approach with respect. Without the need to fill spaces, you expand your symbolic field. The woman who fascinates does not carry the weight of excess, but the profound lightness of one who knows that part of herself will always remain beyond complete understanding. It is an invitation to encounter mystery, and in that mystery resides the strength that commands presence without noise. In the next moment, we will see how this mystery combines with the dignified withdrawal to generate real respect when the woman, instead of imposing herself, chooses to step aside with serenity. That will be the point where internal value becomes non-negotiable and, paradoxically, indestructible. There is a silent belief, often rooted in an ancient drama, that to be respected, you need to raise your voice to uphold your point until the other yields. It is like believing that the weight of your indignation, when brandished firmly, will be the key that opens the doors to recognition. But most of the time, that strategy shouts in the same way as the silence you so detest. When you impose yourself without resonating with your own soul, the external force becomes an overload, and the other shuts down, perceiving less the value of your word and more the nuisance of your insistence. You feel anxiety tightening your body every time you face a situation in which your worth is ignored. Your heart races, your mind churns, and you think that if you speak even louder, the world will finally listen. But instead, there comes a rupture. Faces close off, gazes avert, and you realize that by trying to convince, you lost the intimate space where dignity blossoms. The urgency to prove something to the other hides the urgency to heal an internal wound that screams to be seen. The inner masculine, that psychic aspect that seeks to orient itself by respecting the feminine, reacts unexpectedly when it perceives that you, in an act of self-care, decide to step away. There is a beauty in that withdrawal. It does not carry the energy of abandonment, but the crown of authority that says, "I know my worth and I will not remain where I am not treated as such." In that simple gesture, you sustain your truth in a non-negotiable way. Dignity asks for no permission. It demands recognition by proclaiming its own space without rancor, only with the firmness of one who does not negotiate herself. The woman who discovers this form of symbolic authority experiences a moment of internal tension, as if her chest were a ship about to set sail. You feel a mixture of fear and relief as you turn your back on a situation where you were diminished. Something in your body expands because, for the first time, the criterion of value does not depend on the other's gaze, but on your internal consciousness. This shift of power from the other to you reveals that to be respected, you do not need to build walls, but simply refuse to be pushed against them. Have you noticed how absence echoes in the other's psyche? When you leave an empty space, the other feels the weight of your absence. The absence of your voice when it fell silent, the absence of your presence when you withdrew. And that void can be more eloquent than any imposition. It is not about manipulation, but a silent invitation for them to recognize the value of the one who is absent. This is how respect is born, not in accusation, but in the perception of momentary loss, which reveals what was once taken for granted. Fascination, then, accompanies this act of withdrawal. It arises when you demonstrate confidence in leaving what does not value you, like a goddess returning to her internal temple, flawless and whole. There is no resentment in your steps, only the lightness of one who walks with an aligned soul. In that flow, the other recognizes not only your absence, but the integrity you maintained. And that integrity, finally perceived, translates into genuine reverence, not by imposition, but by deep understanding of your worth. Allowing yourself that dignified retreat is the point where the power of not yielding to old patterns of humiliation is found. It is an act of self-love that echoes like a silent manifesto. The woman who withdraws without crying out for justice creates the internal right that demands the honor of those who observe. From that moment on, respect ceases to be something to be earned and becomes an inevitable consequence of your own radiance. In the next chapter, we will move on to the symbolic practices that expand this energetic field, teaching how to cultivate in daily life the internal gaze that sustains your archetypal presence. Close your eyes for a moment and turn inward. as if diving into deep waters. Feel the gentle warmth surrounding your belly, the rhythm beating in your pulse, the slight tingling behind your chest. It is there, in that silent space, that your internal gaze dwells, a beacon that illuminates not what lies before you, but what pulses at your center when you shine light. Upon that internal point, everything around you takes on a different hue. Your energetic field aligns with who you truly are, not with who you were conditioned to be. Imagine yourself seated on a throne made of roots and stars, an ancient scene that reverberates in the psyche. Observe yourself from above, perceiving the invisible crown resting on your skull. Who in your life still feels entitled to place a foot upon that throne? Identify the name, fix the face that comes to mind. Feel the inner. Music that plays when you establish boundaries between your sacred space and the outside world. It is in that symbolic cut that your field begins to transform. Now, bring your hands to your heart and press gently. Feel the warm contact as if igniting a gentle flame in your ribcage. Remain there, listening to your body's whisper. The question guiding this movement is simple on paper, but profound in experience. In which situations do I diminish myself to be accepted? Allow the answers to come in, the form of images, sensations, or even words that arise effortlessly. Each fragment that appears reveals a point of vulnerability and also a potential for liberation. Straighten up, expanding your spine as if it were the stem of a flower blooming. Feel the base of your torso connected to the earth, absorbing the ancestral firmness that sustains all the women who came before you. Lift your gaze, not to see the other, but to recognize the internal horizon that grows within you. When your internal posture aligns with this sensation of grounding and expansion, your energetic field expands too. You cease to be merely a point of energy seeking approval and become an integral presence that radiates symbolic authority. Remain in this position for a few moments, until the harmony between body and mind creates a rhythmic pulse within you. Feel in your body the contrast between the moment you submitted and the present moment in which you accept your own power. Let this new vibration run through every cell, every fiber of your being, carrying with it the memory of every time you silenced your soul. By rekindling that memory, you re-signify it, transforming pain into symbol, wound into badge of strength. Carrying this internal gaze into daily life is an act of reverence for your own existence. Every time you notice the urge to bend before a louder voice or to give up your space to please, close your eyes mentally and seek the internal throne. Reflect, who still sits above me? When you ask, create a bodily rhythm. Breathe deeply, straighten your shoulders, align your chin with your chest, and move forward. This daily practice acts as a symbolic filter, purifying your energy of everything that does not resonate with your essence. And it is precisely in this movement of anchoring yourself in your truth that respect and fascination begin to emerge. You do not need grand gestures to transform your field. You only need to persist in this silent alliance with your own center. Each time you return to the internal gaze, each time you restore the pulse of your intimate reign, the archetypal presence strengthens, and with it, the reverence that arises in those who witness your coherence. There exists an image that spans millennia and reaches you as a whisper of the sacred, the woman who in ancient ceremonies rose upon living coals, dancing at the epicenter of her own fire. It is not a spectacle, but an interior rite, in which the external flame symbolizes the internal. Strength that burns away doubts and exudes power. She seeks to prove nothing to audiences, but honors the fire that lives in her blood, revealing herself as a channel between heaven and earth, between the visible and the invisible. This ancient woman knew something essential. Whoever masters her fire needs no applause, for her very existence is an act of reverence to the mystery of life. When you imagine that ancestral dance, feel the heat rising slowly from the soles of your feet to your heart. Each step is a silent prayer, each turn a baptism of courage. You carry within you that same ardor, that same capacity to transform fear into a spark of light. For a long time, you may have believed that exposing yourself to the internal fire would be too risky, but the truth is that by denying that flame, you deprive yourself of the vitality that moves the world. The woman who hides from her own fire becomes cold and dull. The one who embraces it, even in the vulnerability of her flames, reveals herself to be incomparable in her intensity. At the heart of this metaphor lies the symbolic relationship between passion and power. The external fire represents the realm of strong emotions, of ancestral passions that grant you strength, but can also consume you in uncontrollable rebellion. When you dance at the center, you learn to conduct that energy. You do not let the fire dominate you, but direct it with grace and intention. Your movements, even if silent, vibrate with the dynamics of a primordial element, and whoever observes feels called to acknowledge the magnitude of an encounter that goes beyond appearances. There is something mystical in how the flames light sketches shadows on your face. Those shadows are not errors to be corrected, but fragments of your story that deserve visibility. The woman of the fire embraces every nuance, the fear that trembles in her bones, the anger that burns in her blood, the longing that pounds in her soul. She does not dance to erase pains, but to celebrate them as part of a greater fabric that includes both ecstasy and downfall. And in doing so, she finds a power that is not for sale, that is not surrendered out of affection or fear, but remains intact in its sacred origin. The inner warrior that lives in the healthy man senses that fire and approaches not to extinguish it, but to honor it. He recognizes that he cannot possess something that burns with such purity. He can only approach with care, offering loyalty to the fire, in the form of respect. It is not about subservience, but a sacred alliance. She, dancer of the flame, and he, attentive guardian of its glow. When that happens, respect and fascination become inseparable, for no symbol is as powerful as one that reveals to the other both vulnerability and at the same time invincibility. Allow yourself then to feel that dance as an internal call. Visualize for a few moments the space around you burning in golden red, as if each memory of pain were coated in meaning and light. Feel your feet touching the warm ground, your breath aligned with the ancestral rhythm of life that pulses in every cell. And in that imaginary rite, gather the certainty that whoever masters the internal fire carries within herself a symbol that no wind can extinguish. The woman who knows her own heat will never be treated like a dead ember. By bringing this metaphor into your daily life, all the small trials by fire, the disdainful glance, the cutting word, the sudden indifference, become invitations to dance again at the center of your soul. Each challenge becomes a new choreography, where your respect and fascination manifest effortlessly, simply because you do not deny the flame that animates you. And thus, the ancestral tradition is renewed in you, creating a continuous cycle of healing and power, guided by the wisdom that overflows from your own sacred fire. Throughout this journey, you have encountered the marks of a story written not only in words, but in silent gestures and emotional echoes. You perceived the pain of one who begged for attention and attracted devaluation, understood the mystery that fascinates by sustaining the unspoken, discovered the strength that springs from dignified withdrawal, and practiced the internal gaze that redefines your energetic field. In the ancestral dance of the fire, you touched the sacred flame that pulses in your soul, learning that it is possible to conduct the fire without being consumed. Now, what remains is the deep integration of all these layers within you. Carl Jung taught us that the integration of opposites generates magnetism. By uniting firmness with sensitivity, you activate the deepest masculine unconscious, not as an object of manipulation, but as a mirror of a truth that reverberates beyond the ego. The woman who carries her own center simultaneously embodies the solidity of a rock and the fluidity of a river. She preserves her sweetness without dissolving, sustains her mystery without closing off, and maintains her presence without needing to prove herself. It is this integration that constitutes the unbreakable seal of respect. Clarissa Pinkola Estes would say that this woman walks with her soul exposed, but her ego in silence. Indeed, the silence that envelops the soul awakens a magnetism so intense that the world around begins to turn at her rhythm. It is not about withholding information or feelings as a strategy, but about honoring the sacred space where your essence and your history reside. It is in that inner resting place that fascination is born, not from curves or rehearsed words, but from invisible symbols that only a sensitive heart recognizes. The respect you so sought, the one that seemed to slip away whenever you raised your voice, now manifests naturally. It does not shout, it springs forth. The fascination that seemed to depend on fascinated glances now sustains itself effortlessly. Both bloom as an inevitable consequence of one who decided to inhabit her own internal temple with fullness. You have discovered that there is no deeper ascent than the one made inward, nor a more powerful conquest than rediscovering the sovereignty of your soul. If something within you opened with this video, write in the comments. Sometimes sharing also heals. And if you want to continue on this soulful journey, we are here whenever you wish to return.